This is Hudson Valley Storycatcher. I'm Jen Lee. In today's episode, we'll hear about a paradigm shift that has the power to really transform how we understand and approach differences in ourselves, our children, and the communities we live in. That's the neurodiversity paradigm. Neurodiversity is a word you may be hearing more of lately, and you may never have heard of it at all yet. Either way, you're in the right place. Joining me is SarahRose Hogan, a registered play therapist and the founder of Giving Tree Counseling in Kingston, New York. We explore what it looks like to view the natural variety of human brains, not as a hierarchy or a list of personal failures, but as an important form of diversity that benefits all of us. We also talk about stripping away the shame that often surrounds differences in behavioral and sensory needs, and how we can build communities rooted in accommodation and understanding. Hi, SarahRose.
Hi.
What else should we know about you?
That the neurodiversity paradigm changed my life.
For people who don't know, can you first just start by telling us the word neurodiversity? What does that encompass?
I want to acknowledge it means different things to different people. And I'm coming from a research background and a personal background and a parenting background when I talk about it. And what it means to me is that the variety of human brain traits and types improves things for everybody. It doesn't take away. So neurodiversity comes from the theory of biodiversity that diversity benefits everybody. It doesn't take things away, and we should celebrate that, not see it as a hierarchical status of brains, like some are better than others, some are worse than others. And it acknowledges the systemic impact of folks that have differences instead of seeing it as a personal failing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just curious, is that an alternative to framing something in terms of ability and disability?
In a way, yeah. So it frames mental health needs instead of having something wrong with you, like the medical model, right? Is you have the flu and so you go to the doctor and you get better.
You're like, is there a cure?
Yeah, and that's great for illness because I also want to get better from that, right?
Right.
But there are things that you can't take away or someone maybe doesn't want to. And so instead of seeing it as there's something wrong with you, that this is different, it's thinking about this person needs support to be in our world.
That's a nice shift. And I think people who are having a diverse experience are more aware of where the environment is not prioritizing them or their needs.
Yeah. What I see a lot in therapy practice and kind of the goal of Giving Tree is to support individuals and families in not seeing themselves as wrong, but seeing themselves as a person with needs and having that be okay.
I imagine that that's pretty encouraging for parents also, and maybe a helpful shift for them as they're parenting children who have different needs. You founded the Giving Tree Counseling here in Kingston. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of populations you're really aiming to serve here?
Our focus and our heart is really specifically in neurodivergence, which is really a big label for everything, right? Our niche in that is autism, ADHD, learning differences, definitely trauma-impacted folks, and anxiety, depression, some behavioral stuff, and OCD. And we see kids all the way to adults. So we really try to encompass the lifespan, but we have a really strong emphasis on family work. And that can be families at any age. We do a lot of group and family work.
That's really great to hear. I know a lot of families are needing support or looking for support, or maybe even living in a circumstance or a situation where they're like, I don't even know if that's possible or available to me. If you're someone, or if you have a child in your life who's not a sit still and have a long conversation where we intellectualize and vocalize things, we might not know that there's an option for us that could be called therapy. So I'd love to hear you explain some of the like broader ways that you practice that here?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I almost didn't become a social worker because I always wanted to work with autistic folks. And I did that in undergrad in like a respite, like a one-on-one capacity. And I've always wanted to work with people that have higher support needs. So, for example, they may be non-speaking, so not have access to verbal language, or require like 24 hours care. It's a range of support needs that can change over time. But my intention has always been to serve folks that are traditionally left out of psychotherapy. And so if you think about it, if that's my intention, that I'm always working towards, you need modalities that are not talk-based to reach diverse folks. And that's why here we really lean into play-based work, sand tray, parent-child work, and EMDR, which can be very non-speaking itself. It can be an internal process, and it has a lot of flexibility for adaptation and support.
And for those not familiar, can you explain what EMDR means?
Totally. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's one of the leading evidence-based trauma treatments, which means that they've done research on it. And EMDR is actually one of the most studied psychotherapies because it kind of baffles people and they want to prove it doesn't work, honestly. And what it involves is the therapist helps the client access trauma material related to a memory. And just so you know, when I say trauma, I'm using a very wide definition, which is self-defined as a painful experience. So you would decide what a trauma is, not me.
And we're not necessarily saying like it has to be a huge, like I survived a giant climate catastrophe or something, right? We're not talking about the scope, necessarily.
Totally. It could be that.
Yeah.
Could be a bullying incident, right? It could be misattunement where your parent didn't understand you but didn't even have bad intentions. It could be something embarrassing that happened. It could be anything.
Yeah.
And so I help the client bring that up through a set of questions that like lights up that memory network. And then we use bilateral stimulation, which can be eye movements, which is where the name comes from, where you're back and forth with your eyes. But it can also be tactile tapping. It can also be with music in your ears. It can be waving a magic wand. It can be tapping things on a wall, drums. There's a huge variety of what even that component could mean.
That's so interesting.
It's really amazing. It's changed my life, changed my client's life. And so what it does is it moves memories from a stuck place in your brain to a resting place in your brain. And so you don't have distress connected to those memories anymore.
I think part of what's so appealing about that is this idea that you could have potentially much quicker relief than just, you're going to have to talk about this 2 years before you feel better. Right?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Kind of like it sounds like a fast track almost.
Definitely. I think, research supports it's quicker than other evidence-based treatments like prolonged exposure, which is repeatedly telling the story. And so it does resolve more quickly and more gently.
Yeah. So can you describe a little bit about what a play therapy session might look like? Because I know it's really fun to walk into a room and to see like sand trays and little toys and stuff. But I think we haven't seen a lot of depictions of that. So what could that look like?
So it's a great question. I got to be honest that it really depends on the therapist and the theory that they're utilizing. So play therapy has different foundational theories. And I'm a registered play therapist, right? So there's like bureaucracy and like a lot of layers to this conversation. But essentially the theory guides how you engage with the child. And people can use multiple theories and that's okay. But there's a range of how directive, like we're going to do this today, or non-directive, what do you want to do today, that the therapist might employ with kids. And I am directive or non-directive kind of based on what the client can access and what they need. So how a play therapy session is going to look with me really depends on the kid. I will say that what the meat of the session or that therapy is actually the play, not talking over, right? So how kids are communicating to me is through the play, not necessarily what they say, and how they're in relationship with me in the therapy room. So we're playing a game and I'm noticing themes in the game. I'm noticing that the client really wants to direct the play and that feels really good to them, for example. And so then I'm using that information to really support the family on how to help the kid, because I see work with, saying kids in quotes here because we want to stretch that into beyond 18. But I see the family really as the place of intervention, not the individual. And that's kind of going back to the theory that I subscribe to.
Right. So you're saying, okay, in what's happening here, the issue is not that something is quote unquote wrong with the individual that needs to be fixed or changed, but that if we work with a family as a system, that we can bring information and education that can help the interactions between the members go more smoothly. Am I understanding it?
Well said. Yeah. I want to say that some folks have distress and I want to help them not have that distress, right? So people might have goals around what they want to be different for them. And I want to support those goals. So that could be individual change. It's not going to be change of an autism trait, for example. But with the family and clients too, I'm looking at accommodation. So how can we change an expectation that reflects this person's need? Or support. What actionable helping support can family, school, them themselves to themselves, anything provide so that person is more happy, healthy, accessing joy, life, those things.
I'm curious if you could share some of the traits that you're seeing in the population that you're working with that are maybe seen or traditionally judged in a negative light, and how we can instead look at those as things that we could build accommodation for.
So, for example, I have fine motor differences. So I have hypermobility and joint issues with my hands. So I can't write neatly. I just cannot. But for my whole life, I was told that I was writing too fast and I was too messy and I wasn't taking my time and I wasn't doing this and I wasn't doing that. And the truth is, I just have that physical limitation that is going to impact that. And I can do other things to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I do is I try my best on a form, but I will say to somebody I have this difference where it's really hard for me to write in a way that's legible and I might need something else. So I have to self-advocate for that accommodation. And I do encounter people that might be judgmental, and I just decide to kind of reject the judgment.
Yeah. And do you think people can advocate for themselves in other ways when it comes from I'm imagining things like needing a break to stretch and move with a long meeting, or I don't know, one thing I feel particularly sensitive about is my work environment. Things like the lighting and the noise level. And I have the two voices, right? One is I could say something.
Yeah.
And say I need to bring some different light bulbs from home or whatever. But maybe if we're used to the grin and bear it point of view, how would you help people filter out and be you don't have to white knuckle this or,
So hard. So
what do you notice that's oh, this is rising to the level of a thing that I could say, I could make this easier for myself?
It really starts with shifting your paradigm, right? Which I'm still doing, which is moving into the neurodiversity paradigm, where I see difference as a benefit to everybody. And away from the pathology paradigm, which is I see difference as something wrong that people need to fix.
Like this, you're not thinking, I'm showing a sign of weakness. You're like flipping it and saying, no, I'm bringing something of value to the table here.
100%. I think it is valuable.
Yeah.
Sensory environment's a great example because you can't have a sensory-friendly environment that's because people have different sensory needs. You have to have a sensory flexible environment.
Oh, that's a really good distinction.
Yeah. So like, for example, we have like different lighting options. In the room we're in right now, we don't have fluorescent light covers because I will not turn these overhead lights on, so I don't need them. But in the other rooms of our office, we have covers over. When we do events, we like bring headphones and glasses, right? We don't use scents here because people might have like an aversion to scents. So it's how do you flex the environment so each person's needs are met? So when you're advocating for your own needs, the only thing I would encourage folk to be mindful about is if that impacts another person or not. It doesn't impact another person if it's just something different. I'm saying impacts another person like if I'm saying I have to have my music blaring in speakers, then other people hear it. And like that's not community. But like if I'm wearing headphones, that doesn't do anything to anyone else, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Can we shift and talk a little bit about the community of Kingston?
Sure.
Have you always been here? What brought you here? And then also, how does your work here connect you with the community?
My goal is always to do more community work. Autistic folks in specific are really isolated.
Yeah.
And there aren't spaces for us, especially folks with higher support needs. So that's always my intention, and I really just want to keep doing that forever. forever. Keep growing community. I moved to the area when I was a young teenager and went around for college a little bit, and then landed back here. And I love Kingston. I love being here. I think the people here are really like lovely. And I think that we're not a really open space for people with different needs. Physically, like I think there's a lot of intense limits for folks with physical disabilities. But even like our parks, I don't know if you've noticed that we don't have parks that have gates. And a lot of autistic kids elope, which means run off. And it's really unsafe and sad. And I see that limit folks access a lot with my own children and then other children that I see. So it's things like that that are really on my mind to try to make an impact so community can be seen for everyone.
Yeah, so some of that I'm hearing is like happening at the level of like city planning even.
Yeah.
And that it could be easy to overlook if you're not someone who's aware of that need. It would be easy to think like, oh, it's just like more visually pleasing to not have a gate around the playground.
Right, totally.
But I think that definitely impacts a parent's ability to even just have an experience of like, I can sit on the bench for a minute.
It sends a message we didn't think of your kid.
Yeah.
And there's this concern of play deprivation for kids, which means that there's so much focus on them functioning that they don't get time to play. So that's something really important to me as like a play therapist, parent, person, everything.
What can people do to figure out whose needs they should be taking into account when they're making decisions, either from like city planning or like running a workplace? If people are like, I want to know better, do better, who should they reach out to, or how would they go about that? You
know, you keep hearing me talk about theory. I'm really interested in research and writing and that, right?
Yeah.
So the theory I would tell folks to look at is universal design. And universal designs for learning, they work together.
Right.
Universal design is this idea that we don't design something and then add in accessibility. From the beginning of when we think of something, we think about how is everybody going to access this space in a way that doesn't separate them, but includes them from the start. And it looks like it was baked into the design, not like, we got to put a gate over here, right?
Or a ramp.
Yeah,
at the last minute.
Exactly.
So it's like we have a ramp to get in, but if you're in a wheelchair, but none of the halls are wide enough Or you can't get into any of the restrooms, right?
Or you have to go in a different entrance, right?
Yeah.
And you're not with the group. I would take any ramp in Kingston, though, because they're hard to find. I got to be honest with you.
Keep the ramps coming.
I'm like, this is my ideal, but we can do whatever below that. But that is my ideal. And then universal designs for learning is thinking about that when we think about learning, that folks, they don't brand themselves this way, but I think they should. To me, it's really the neurodiversity paradigm of like a learning theory. It's thinking that everybody's brain works differently. We know that. Let's start with flexible goals that work with the student. And it's all about multiple means of representation of information instead of thinking everyone learns from a lecture. We give the lecture and everyone's going to get it the same way.
Yeah, that's a really good example, too, because I think we're all familiar, most of us, with the idea that we can have different learning styles, right?
Yeah.
I learn best if I hear something said out loud, or if I read it, or if I write it.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you wish more people knew or understood about neurodiversity in general, or the neurodiverse people in their lives that they may or may not even realize have a diagnosis or...
Got a lot to say here. But what I would say about the neurodiversity paradigm or the term neurodiversity in general is its intention is to include all people. It's meant to be inclusion, like to bring people in, not push people out. I believe the neurodivergence is an identity label that's self-assigned. So I don't, as my therapist, see myself as somebody stamping approval. I think sometimes clients might see me that way, but I see everybody as being able to self-assign neurodivergent as an identity label. And I do not see it owned by providers to provide.
So you're letting the client that you're working with claim that identity for themselves.
100%. I might see them as neurodivergent.
Right.
But that is an identity label, and they get to self-subscribe or not.
Yeah. What kind of shifts do you think it can make for us in general, relationally, to have that kind of paradigm shift of neurodiversity is a part of the human experience and it's additive. It's bringing something and contributing something to all of us.
I think it frees you up to be in more authentic connection as your real self and seeing somebody else as their true self.
Yeah.
And you hear me use this word moral failing a lot, right? That's kind of my thing, right? It's like when we don't understand how someone's brain works, we tend to assign a moral failing. So if I don't know that an autistic person has a different social preferences and culture, right? I might self-assign rudeness to somebody that values authenticity over social norms. And that's assigning a moral failing to somebody that I don't think owns that. Instead, you could say, that didn't feel good to me, like what you said. I'm not saying you just say, oh, well, that's how that person works and that's fine. You can say, hey, that didn't feel great, what you said. And like, I need you to say that differently. That is well and that's okay. But it's assigning the moral failing that the person's bad because they had a difference in that interaction. That's what I'm focused on.
So one thing we can maybe do is like notice when we are assigning a moral failing to someone.
Yeah.
That we're watching them with a certain behavior and then we're making a judgment like they really need to learn some self-control or whatever the fill in the blank is.
Yeah.
That we could stop and be like, wait, I'm assigning a moral failing here. When instead maybe I could address this with curiosity and use it as a chance to connect with the person.
Totally. And like,
be like, this
openness.
Is what's happening for me. What's happening for you?
Exactly. Which is really against like predominant white culture, right? Which is like, you're not doing what? You're not on script here. Get on the script, right? And then, so I'm pushing back against that and saying, hey, like, I just want to check in about this that happened. And so being okay with confrontation, like I'm saying that in quotes, right? Which I think is really hard for most of us to do. And that's where a lot of the breakdown happens.
I think maybe because we think of confrontation as something being like angry or combative, and it doesn't have to be, right? Because the way you're describing it, to me, the tone of that just sounds like curious.
Totally. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I did a lot of personal work with Ross Green. I don't know if you've heard of him, Dr. Ross Green, and collaborative problem solving. Or collaborative and proactive solutions. They've changed the name recently, so now I'm forgetting which one is the right one. But it's a really great theory for working with kids that takes away this idea that a kid is being bad and we have to use some kind of system to reward or punish their behavior, and instead identifies needs a child has and how adults in the life can help meet the needs of the child. So it really is about parents or adults changing, not the child changing. And personally, professionally, it's really kind of core for us. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely had a moment as a parent where I was told by someone who I trusted, I was saying, here's the thing, I have a kid in a school that's not a fit.
Yeah.
And the advice I was given was, don't change the kid, change the school.
Love it.
And it was like told to me with like such a kind but firm authority that it just like gave me the confidence I needed to make the decision.
Yeah.
Where I think sometimes we're looking at someone, whether it's a child that we're parenting or someone in our life that we're trying to support, we see someone struggling. It's not always clear what's the supportive thing to do here. You know?
Right.
Should I be, challenging the kid or being like, we need a better homework routine, or I don't know, all the things people try.
So true.
Maybe if we just buy them another planner. Like, I'm just thinking about like all of the things that, because I think so many messages we get on social media can be really, at some point, I think in my parenting journey, I realized all of the messaging I'm getting societally, none of it works for my specific kids. So I need to just like push all that aside and find a different way.
Yes. And you don't want to try to neuronormalize your kid, right? And that means make them seem more normal, which is often goals, but isn't the goal of the neurodiversity paradigm.
Right. Like more like, can you just act like you're not having the experience you're having?
Exactly.
Which sounds harmful.
It is harmful. Like there's a lot of long-term research about how that increases risk of suicide and depression, trauma-related symptoms, anxiety, etc. So,
and maybe the people trying to do that are thinking that they're going to save this person.
Of course they are.
From societal consequences, right? But
there's some truth to that.
But that's not the only harm to take into consideration.
Yeah, I think about it as like short-term success at a long-term loss. That's my conceptualization. So you might get like short-term success with behavioral strategies, for example. If I tell my child, you're not going to get this thing if you do this, that might work over a period of time, but it's not teaching a skill and it's not advancing something. And so it, in my experience, comes at a long-term loss. For example, that skill doesn't translate when they go to college and then they can't access college. You can think of a lot of examples with that. So I think removing the shame and kind of going back to where I started, where approaching yourself with compassion instead of criticism is vital and important. It's okay to make mistakes and make amends. That's part of the work.
I'm just grateful that you and your practice are here in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
Working with the people that you're working with, assisting the families that you're assisting, and having your eye on a community that's accessible and welcoming for everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
I was so happy to talk to you. It's been great.
Thanks so much for listening. As always, you can support the show with a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Do you know someone doing good work in the Hudson Valley? Email us at hudsonvalleystorycatcher@gmail.com to recommend them as a guest on the show. Until next time, keep your heart open and your ears ready. Every neighbor has a story. I'm Jen Lee. Thank you for catching this story with me.